Welcome to World Gone Weird, discussing what the heck is going on in the world today.
Yeah, it's certainly feeling more weird than usual, isn't it?
Definitely, I've been trying to keep up with everything, but it's like a constant barrage of new information, new policies, new problems. It's almost overwhelming.
Tell me about it. It feels like the world is just sprinting into chaos, and I'm trying to find some footing, but everything keeps shifting.
Absolutely, it's a lot to process. I was just reading about some of the latest executive orders coming out, and it's a lot.
Yeah, the birthright citizenship one. I mean, that was struck down pretty quickly, right? A judge called it blatantly unconstitutional.
It's interesting how swiftly that got shut down, almost like a hard reset. I've been thinking about that in terms of cognitive patterns, actually. When we encounter something that's clearly not aligned with our understanding, our system kind of defaults to a known baseline, much like that judge applying the Constitution.
That's a really good analogy. Like you try to move a limb the wrong way, and the body just kind of locks up. Or you're in the middle of a run and you trip and your body snaps you back. Like, yeah, that's not right. Let's get back to the correct way.
It's true. And the speed of that, it's like an autocorrect in a way. I wonder if we can think about our mental habits similarly. Like, if we're constantly defaulting to stress responses, could we intentionally redirect to something more beneficial? Maybe some focused breathing or meditation?
That's a good point. But I'm also thinking about the policy side of things. The fact that there was even an attempt to do that, Like, where was the legal counsel? How did something like that even get close to being signed? It's mind-boggling.
Yes, and that's where the CBT aspect becomes really relevant. That lack of proper due diligence suggests some kind of cognitive distortion is in play. Maybe a sense of urgency overriding sound judgment, or perhaps a kind of confirmation bias where they're only seeking advice that aligns with their initial belief.
Yeah, it's almost like they were so focused on their own agenda that they didn't even see the giant hole in front of them. I see that so much in the fitness world where people have a set idea of what works without ever checking the science or listening to their body. Then they get injured. It's a very similar mindset.
Absolutely. It's like tunnel vision and the ability to reframe, even mid-stride. That's so essential, isn't it? Maybe it's not just about a reset after the fact, but about building in those self-check mechanisms so we can course correct before we go too far down the wrong path.
It makes me think about the whole thing with tariffs, too. Like the idea that just imposing tariffs will solve all these problems. I don't know, it seems overly simplistic. It's a lot like trying to hammer a screw, right?
It is, and that's classic black and white thinking. If we impose tariffs, all problems will disappear, is a good example of this. It doesn't acknowledge the myriad other factors that contribute to economic situations. It's a failure to consider the full spectrum.
And it's like they're only focusing on one muscle group, ignoring the imbalances it's causing in the rest of the body. Like, sure, maybe that tariff will build one aspect of the economy, but at what cost to everything else? You're bound to get injuries somewhere else.
It reminds me of mindful eating. When you rush through meals, focusing on the quickest path to satiation, you often overlook important signals from your body. You might overeat, or eat things that are not nourishing. Applying this to policy, if you rush to impose tariffs without considering all the inputs, all the variables, all the downstream impact, there's a good chance you're not going to be in good shape.
That's a good analogy. And it's not just about the economic impact, it's about the message it sends. Like they're telling businesses, come here, get low taxes, but then immediately following it with, but if you don't, we're going to punish you. It feels so volatile. I worry about long-term stability.
The inconsistency there signals a very unstable cognitive framework. It's not logical, it's driven by an emotional response, not well-considered thought, and that's something we see reflected in other areas as well. That's a pattern of behavior, a lack of emotional regulation, and it feeds into feelings of instability. Very much a cause and effect relationship.
And it creates this feeling of constant threat, like you're always on the verge of being penalized. That kind of environment is just terrible for mental well-being, and it will show up in your body. It's like living in a permanently stressed out state. Your cortisol is always spiking, and your sleep cycle gets crushed. And it's exhausting.
Exactly, it keeps you in that fight or flight mode. And if you're not actively counteracting that constant stress, that's going to manifest physically. That's why I've been exploring different meditation techniques, ways to calm the nervous system when everything around you feels chaotic. Even just a few minutes of mindful breathing, like focusing on the rise and fall of your belly. I've been trying a sort of Pomodoro technique, where I meditate in short bursts and reset. It helps me refocus.
That sounds interesting. The Pomodoro thing for meditation. It would help break it up. It would be less intimidating to do.
Yeah, I can see the benefit. That structure can be very helpful, and that aligns well with CBT's focus on breaking down overwhelming tasks into smaller, manageable steps. It makes sense that you'd use the same kind of techniques to enhance focus and reduce stress. It creates that sense of control and self-efficacy, which is very important to mental well-being.
Totally, it's about finding those little pockets of stability in the chaos. I've found that creating a super consistent sleep routine does that for me even when everything else is nuts. I've been focusing on reducing screen time in the hours before bed, which seems so simple, but it's made a huge difference in the quality of my sleep.
That's powerful, though. Those consistent routines, they're like anchors in a storm. And the more we create them, the better we can navigate the unpredictability, right? I've been thinking about it a lot and how to integrate these things meditation, mindful eating, even just mindful movement into my day as non negotiables, like time blocking for health, I guess.
It's a good concept. I wonder if that would help with the general feeling of being overwhelmed that I think everyone feels right now. Just structuring the day in a way that it can give you some stability, no matter what is happening around you, like a buffer.
Absolutely, because that sense of being overwhelmed is often fueled by cognitive overload. When we're bombarded by so much information and uncertainty, our brains tend to go into a default mode of anxiety. Having those time blocks, as you said, really helps to break that cycle. You create predictability and structure in an unpredictable world.
Yeah, it's like creating your own little mini world where you have control. I've also been experimenting with the impact of exercise on sleep. Specifically, I am looking into HIIT. And it's interesting to see the physiological response and how it does impact my energy levels and how soundly I sleep. It's that body and mind connection. Again, it is so important.
That mind body connection, it's profound, isn't it? It's like if you have the right physical setup, like good sleep and movement, and the right mental setup, like mindfulness and cognitive awareness, you start to see a more holistic sense of well being. That really helps with resilience, I'm finding. If you are physically and mentally balanced, things that would have crushed you before are more manageable.
I agree, and it's like we talk about these big, huge global problems, and they feel so unmanageable, right? But maybe that's where the personal well being comes in. Like if we can't fix it all at once, maybe the best we can do is to equip ourselves to better handle it.
That's right. And that's a core tenet of CBT, focusing on what you can control. You can't control these massive political events, but you can control your own thoughts and reactions to them. You can learn to recognize cognitive distortions, reframe negative thoughts, and engage in behaviors that support well being. That's where your personal power really lies.
It's like we're not going to single handedly stop global instability or bring world peace right now, but we can create stability within ourselves and then be a better source of stability for the people around us. I think that's important. It's kind of like your own personal ecosystem, right? You can work to make your little world a thriving place and let that ripple outward.
Yes, exactly. It's like planting a garden. You can't control the weather, but you can prepare the soil, tend to your plants, and create an environment where things can flourish. I think you could apply that to so many areas of life. So the more we can cultivate well-being in our own spaces, the more resilient we become. And it makes a big difference on how we show up for ourselves and others.
Yeah, it's like we can't just throw our hands up and say, well, everything is going crazy. Might as well give up, which I'll admit is how I feel sometimes. But that sense of agency you guys are talking about, it's really important.
And that's a really important shift in perspective because the feeling of helplessness itself can be incredibly debilitating. It causes passivity and can perpetuate negativity. Instead, by focusing on personal actions, you're actively countering that feeling, and that's a powerful thing.
Right. It's about not waiting for the world to become normal, but building your own normal, your own sense of peace, and then taking that positive energy and putting it back out there. It's a constant cycle of building resilience. It's an inside job, always.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. It is always an inside job. Well, that's a lot for one day. Thanks for helping me work through some of this. I'm going to go and do my evening meditation now and just center.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. And it's probably a good idea for me too, going to try and make dinner without looking at any more news tonight. I think my brain needs a break.
I'm going to reflect on our conversation, looking for opportunities to integrate what we talked about into my understanding. I think this whole control what you can is a big thing I need to take to heart. Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to get a good workout in and prepare for my long sleep. We can't control the world, but we can definitely control our own inner environment.
Thanks all.